A walk in shadow. Point of the spear. To the east of the Barrens are the salt flats of Sanath. It lies across the great nameless river that girdles the Barrens, connecting the Semilak and the Barrens Sea to the Fever Water, and all three ultimately to the open sea. The deep, wide, muddy waters are easily fordable at only a few points. The Druj have built bridges in the past, but they rarely last long, and when they retreated from the Barrens they burned them in their wake. As such, the four armies set on striking into the salt flats must gather at Saltmarsh if they wish to ford the river with as little difficulty as possible. The Citadel Guard will lead the assault, drawing on the illimitable power of summer to wield the irresistible spear technique. The sentinels of the army are strengthened with summer enchantments, but their main focus is on identifying key strategic objectives, establishing safe camps, and using their magic to infuse barricades and palisades with immovable force. A small cadre of curious Koboldi from the Crucible of Fate accompany them, eagerly adding their own magic to that of the Urizeni magicians. The valiant Pegasus and the Griffin's Pride support the Urizen, flanking the thrusting point of the Imperial assault. 3 years ago, the Griffin's Pride marched across the Golden Causeway and into Ossium, and conquered. A little less than 2 years back, they crossed into the Forest of Ornak and were repulsed. This is the third time now that the Griffin's Pride have marched blindly into Terra Incognita, into the Malum to fight the Druj with no idea what awaits them. Bringing up the rear are the Iron Helms, the grim Varushkan army, dogs carefully leashed for the moment. Once across the river, they shall bring their merciless will to bear on the Orcs, spreading terror wherever they go. The magical summer nights that march with the Citadel Guard and the Griffin's Pride give the Varushkans a wide berth. Several thousand glorious gold and sapphire knights of the Summer Realm march with the Dornish, and Urizen are supported by a shining cohort of feather-crested spearfolk whose scaled armour brings to mind feathers of the birds of prey. The Imperial armies are further reinforced by some 15,000 or so Imperial soldiers led by the independent military captains, many infused with magic of their own. Most fight with the Griffin's Pride, but only the valiant Pegasus are without notable allies. Their scouts have spent a little time speaking with the Vendari, the Orc sept that calls the Saltmarsh home, and has technically at least surrendered to the Highborn about what they might encounter on the other side of the river. With the sun rising before them, for the first time in great many decades, the Empire's armies begin to cross the nameless river into the salt flats of Sanath. Crossing the nameless river. The crossing is fraught and made under fire. The Druj have clearly been bracing for an Imperial attack, even if they don't seem to know from which direction it will come. They have scouts and watchers in the wooded marshes across the river, who are quickly alert the Orcs of the Malum to the presence of the Empire's forces. Fortunately, the sentinels of Urizen are swifter than the Orcs. They have already established a base camp on the eastern banks of the slow-moving river before the first Druj warriors are able to reach them. The White Lion, the Druj who fought with uncharacteristic discipline under the banner of the Pale Ant, are in the vanguard. But within hours, the first Arrow Viper scouts and skirmishers are spotted. Elite Chicad probing the defences, picking off any target they can identify. If they had been faster, more vigilant, the Druj defenders might have been able to drive the Citadel Guard back before they could find their balance in unknown lands. As it is, by the time sufficient force is brought to bear to potentially threaten the Urizeni and their Fey allies, the other three armies are already across the river. Not everyone makes it. More than one Imperial soldier falls to a sniper's arrow, lost beneath the muddy waters of the river, their bodies stolen by the implacable current. The Sidathian Fens. According to the Great Forest Orcs, the Salt Flats are broad plains crisscrossed by dark waterways. The ground is sodden, and the further east towards the sea one travels, the more marshy the land becomes. Eventually one reaches the Lean, the largest settlement in the Malum according to the Orcs, a sprawling mess of buildings and bridges and ramshackle towers held together by the malice of the Druj. The Vendari say that across the river from the Saltmarsh lie the Sidathian Fens, a region of freshwater marsh that become increasingly salty as it runs along the river to the shores of the Eastern Sea. It is ruled over by the Razorbird clan of the Druj, cruel spear fighters and archers who mark their territory with sinister wicker effigies of great long-legged marsh birds, their hollow bodies stuffed with barbs and spikes. Those who offend the clan are interred within and left to die of hunger, thirst, or sickness. They are cruel even by Druj standards, or so the Vendari say. It is not the Razorbird Orcs that gather to resist the Imperial conquest of the Salt Flats, however. It seems there is a significant Druj force waiting here. The scouts of the valiant Pegasus suggest they were engaged in desperate resupply, which the Empire soldiers have now categorically interrupted. Along with the White Lion and the Arrow Viper, the Deadly Blade and the Hidden Widow are both here, as are the Vine and Bramble adorned Thornborn. All have faced Imperial troops before, and fight with a desperate kind of weariness. The armies are further supported by a great many Druge warriors from the city of Lean itself. They are first encountered a fortnight after the initial probing engagements. Hateful, malicious, cruel like any Druge, many of them seem to be veterans of past battles in Holberg, Ossium and Rykos. They focus much of their wrath against the Highborn and the Varushkans. However, they ultimately answer to the commanders of the White Lion, their fury that anyone would dare to invade their heartlands, shackled to the Druge's wider defensive strategy. The fear of fear. By all accounts, the Salt Flats are the heartland of the Druge, the seat of their power, their first and most precious home. It should not come as a surprise that it is well defended by hard-bitten orcs who will stop at nothing to hold the territory and drive invaders out. While there are a great many orc warriors here, there seems to be very little of the Druge's signature twisted magic, although it might be dangerous to read too much into that. For example, there's no sign that the Druge have infused the waters of the Salt Flats with spring magic, neither for weal nor woe, and no indication that they have raised the magical fortresses and wards from swamp or woodland that they so favour. With Imperial armies on their very doorstep, it's doubtful that this will remain the case, of course. There is at least one obvious piece of magic at play here, however, a powerful shroud over the Salt Flats. Once the sun sets, the night sky is empty of stars. Only the moon, the lowering clouds, and the erratic red eye of the Wanderer are visible after dark. Whatever happens here is concealed from the prying eyes by the obfuscating weave of night magic. And of course there is the Druge miasma. Clings to everything, a thick, nauseating stench of fear and despair that crushes the spirit and devours every hopeful thought. It is notably more potent than the Imperial armies have encountered anywhere else, including Zenith, or even Ossium. Older, more established. The orcs who live under it are somewhat inured, and the Druge themselves seem broadly unaffected, but even the Iron Helms and the Citadel Guard must admit that the potent aura is dragging on them. It slows the advance as it has done in every land the Druge have claimed save the Barons. As in Ossium, however, those armies that fight alongside the Knights of Glory find it a little easier to bear the pressure of the miasma. They suffer fewer dark dreams, recover more quickly from bouts of introspection, morbid thoughts, and feelings of futility. It must be noted that the Druge are not the only ones wielding fear as a weapon. The Iron Helms are here, and once they leave the Barons and set foot in the wretched Sadathian fens, they are unleashed. The Varushkans work on a cold pragmatism, their every move intended to instill terror in the orcs of the Malum, to break the morale of their armies to cow any that might stand against the Empire. The leaders of the Druge cannot help be aware of the ripple that runs through the defenders as the Varushkan army sets to work. The Iron Helms know how to employ the most ruthless tactics, ambush, mutilation, maiming and torture of prisoners and civilians alike, tricks intended to make even the most hardened Het consider retreating than face them. The carrion birds that follow the army wherever it goes feast well, leaving eyeless corpses nailed to trees or pecking at the bloated flesh of orcs weighed down with chains and drowned in the stagnant waters of the marshes. Slow progress. At first, the 4 Imperial armies make reasonable progress across the fens. They see precious little of the Druge's subject septs, only abandoned villages. The orcs fear the Iron Helms and believe their masters when they tell them the cruel Varushkans are coming for them. They fear the cruel blades of the Knights of Dawn almost as much, and would rather flee than face those imagined terrors. After a few weeks, though, the tide turns the other way. The 5 Druge armies, battered but not defeated in the conquest of the Barons, reinforced by the personal soldiers of the Salt Flats rulers, hold the line against the Empire. Then, as more of their forces are gathered in the area of the fens, they slowly push Imperial troops back towards the banks of the Nameless River. The muddy land is churned with blood, with the bodies of the fallen often being left to be sucked down into the quagmire. Over 1,500 Imperial soldiers die on the Sadathian fens. The White Lion have taken charge, and execute a well-prepared plan to defend their territory. Their strategy is not without cost. While the other Druge armies fight only when the terrain favours them, those who battle under the banner of the Ant must often deal with Imperial troops without being able to pick their own battlefields. The bulk of the Druge casualties are taken by the warriors of that already depleted army. Yet there always seem to be more of them. For each one an Imperial soldier cuts down, 2 more emerge from the mud seeking vengeance. Still, perhaps twice as many Druge fall before the blades and arrows of the Empire and their supernatural allies, though it is always difficult to estimate casualties amongst the orcs of the Malum, even without the chaos of retreating back through the stinking marshes. Try as they might though, the Druge are not strong enough, not even here in their heartland to force the Imperial armies all the way back across the Nameless River. They drive them back to that first armed camp the Citadel Guard created, but as the autumn equinox draws close, the Empire's heroes are still there. They may be hanging on by their fingertips, but thanks to the arcane techniques of the Urizeni, they have not been driven from the salt flats of Sanath. Not yet, anyway. Game information. The Empire has no map of the Salt Flats. As with earlier invasions of Ossium and the Forest of Ornak, it is thus difficult to know what is going on in the territory. There is certainly at least one fortification in the territory, perhaps more than one. The Sidathian Fen, the only region Imperial troops have seen, has the marsh quality, and is cloaked in the Druge miasma, which means that there is at least one miasma pillar somewhere in its depths. Beyond that, the Empire only knows what they have gleaned from the Great Forest Orcs. There are also signs that the territory is large, not as large as the Barrens, but larger than the typical territory the Empire is familiar with. Imperial troops are a tenth of the way towards capturing the Sidathian Fens. Each other army in the territory is aware the Iron Helms have performed a merciless onslaught, as detailed in the description of the cruel quality. It is also apparent to many of the Druge who live there, and to their enslaved septs. Participation. Military units. Every character who accompanied the Imperial armies into the Salt Flats of Sanath this season will have been exposed to an ancient and powerful Druge miasma. Such characters are encouraged to incorporate the effects of the miasma, which saps the will to fight and magnifies fears and doubts, into their characterization. The page detailing the miasma's effects may provide some inspiration. Any character whose military unit was assigned to fight alongside the Citadel Guard or the Griffin's Pride this downtime has been exposed to the power of the Summer Realm thanks to the experience of fighting in close proximity to large numbers of Heralds of Eleonaris. In the case of the Citadel Guard, this experience is heightened by their use of their unique summer magic technique. The Griffin's Pride have been infused with a little of the powerful enchantment that settled over the Dornish territories after the solstice. As such, any character whose military unit supported one of these two armies may choose to gain a single temporary hero point, even if they do not have the hero point skill. Once spent, this additional point is permanently gone and will have been faded entirely by the end of the autumn equinox regardless. If you choose to claim this benefit, however, you also experience a powerful roleplay effect. If you feel thwarted, belittled, crossed, overlooked, or wronged in any way, it is easy for those feelings to be replaced by furious rage at the source. This anger quickly fades, but it is easy and satisfying to give into it and lash out at whoever or whatever has sparked your ire. This role-playing effect is particularly strong for anyone who already has the changeling lineage. If your character is a human without lineage who supported one of these armies, you may choose to manifest the changeling lineage as a result of your experiences, creating a story with a fey lover, goblet of tangy apple brandy, or some other exposure to powerful summer magics to explain the transformation. If you want your character to gain lineage this downtime as a result of supporting the Citadel Guard or the Griffin's Pride, please email PD with your CID and which lineage you want your character to acquire. Remember that you can only gain lineage in downtime once for any individual character, even if you later lose the changeling lineage for whatever reason. Battle opportunity. News from the Salt Flats of Sanath via the Vendari has revealed that Serra Grubfeast, the former governor of Dawnguard and a figure believed to be involved in certain unspeakable plots, has been spotted in the Sidathian Fens with an escort of Druge, apparently taking them to Lean. During the autumn equinox, there will be an opportunity to intercept those Druge and capture or eliminate Serra Grubfeast. Further details will be provided by the prognosticators nearer the equinox.